Friends, for 11th class, we are continuing with your topic, that is unit, that is thermodynamics. And today's topic in thermodynamics is spontaneous and non-spontaneous processes. Today we shall be discussing what is difference between spontaneous and non-spontaneous processes, how they whether spontaneous processes take place on their own or not, and then the same we will discuss about non-spontaneous processes. So coming to today's topic, that is spontaneous and non-spontaneous processes. First, let me come to spontaneous process. Spontaneous process. In broad terms, spontaneous means which take place, a process that take place on its own, which do not require any external agency to start it. Let me take a few examples first to bring home the concept of spontaneous process. Suppose what we do, we take a beaker containing water. This is water in it. Let me put sugar in it. What we find, when we put sugar in water, the sugar begins to dissolve in water, and this process, that is dissolution of sugar in the water, it takes place on its own. It takes place on its own. We find that after some time sugar gets disappeared. That means it gets dissolved in water. So this example is a typical example of a spontaneous process. Similarly, if we combine, suppose we take a reaction between these two gases, that is hydrogen and chlorine, so that some other gas may be formed. But when we do this, when we react these two gases, what we find, that these gases do not react to form any product. But if we provide a bit of initiation to it, a bit of start to it, by performing this reaction in presence of sunlight, then this reaction takes place and forms another gas, that is hydrogen chloride. So what we find in this process, that the process has taken place, but only in presence of sunlight. So this process has taken place under this initiation. We have initiated the process by performing this reaction in presence of sunlight. So sunlight has here acted as initiation. So what has happened in this reaction, that the reaction has taken place but under initiation. Still it is spontaneous. So this is spontaneous process. This is also spontaneous process. The difference between these two spontaneous processes is that this has taken place on its own, wholly and solely on its own, while as this process has taken place but upon initiation, upon start. We have given sunlight as initiation, and then this reaction has taken place. So in both cases, the processes are spontaneous. So spontaneous processes are also known as feasible. They are feasible processes also. Or we can say that they are probable processes. Probable. So all probable processes like this and feasible like this, these are included in the category of spontaneous processes. So now we are in a position to define spontaneous processes. So spontaneous processes are those processes which take place on their own. On their own means automatically. They take place automatically on their own, or they may take place under initiation. Under some initiation. Such processes are referred to as spontaneous processes. Now, as far as the speed of these processes is concerned, the rate at which they take place, their rate may be very slow to very fast. That means spontaneous processes can take place at a very slow rate, or they can also take place at a very fast rate. So we can say that spontaneous processes are not instantaneous. They may take some time to begin, so they are not instantaneous processes. They may not be instantaneous, but as far as their rates are concerned, that rate of these processes ranges from very slow to quite fast. Now let me give you some examples of these processes, that is spontaneous processes. First we will take some examples where we do not require any initiation. Then we will take some examples where we do require some initiation. First let me go to examples of spontaneous processes. Examples starting with where no initiation is required. Without initiation. These are all spontaneous processes. No initiation needed. Let me take examples. When we dissolve sugar or salt, say salt in this time, in water. This is water here. What happens when salt is put in water? It dissolves on its own. So this is an example of a spontaneous process where we do not require any initiation. So dissolution of salt in water or sugar in water is an example of spontaneous process where we do not require any initiation. Similarly, we find that water evaporates from lakes, from rivers, from ponds, from sea. Evaporation of water from these water bodies. These are all water bodies. Evaporation of water. This is also a typical example of a spontaneous process where again we do not require any initiation. Similarly, let me take one more example. This is nitric oxide. When we react with oxygen, it forms nitrogen dioxide. Now, in this reaction, what we find, when this nitric oxide is basically colorless, it has got no color. But when it combines with oxygen, it undergoes oxidation to form nitrogen dioxide, which has brown color. It is brown in color. So this reaction between nitric oxide and oxygen, when nitric oxide, which is colorless, that turns into nitrogen dioxide, which is brown in color, this is another example of a spontaneous process where we do not require any initiation. Let me take one more example. Conversion of carbon monoxide into carbon dioxide. This is also a spontaneous process, and here again we find no initiation has been given. It has taken place on its own. It is purely a spontaneous process. Then when we dip a zinc rod. This is a zinc rod. When we dip it in a copper sulfate solution, your zinc dissolves in copper sulfate. That is, zinc replaces copper. So when copper gets replaced by zinc, we get zinc sulfate plus copper. So here zinc has dissolved in copper sulfate without any initiation. So these are all examples of spontaneous processes where we do not need any initiation. That is, these all in all these cases no initiation is required. All these processes have taken place on their own. Now we will again give some examples of spontaneous processes, but this time we will take into consideration those spontaneous processes where we will have to provide initiation. Under initiation, there are some spontaneous where we will have to provide some initiation so that the reaction takes place. For example, when we find a wax candle is made up of wax, it does not burn on its own. We all know that a candle which is made up of wax, it has a fuel in it, it has a wax in it, but it does not burn on its own. So how does it burn? We will have to ignite it using matchstick. So when we ignite it, it burns. So burning of candle is an example of spontaneous process, but here this process has taken place under initiation. And what is the initiation? Initiation is the ignition. We have ignited the candle and then the process has taken place. Similarly, the electrolysis of water. This is electrolysis of water into hydrogen and oxygen. This also requires some initiation. For example, electricity. This electricity is initiation. So water does not get electrolyzed into this hydrogen and oxygen. These are two gases. This is liquid water. So this process is spontaneous but under initiation. And what is the initiation here? The initiation is the provision of electricity. We have provided electricity to this process so that electrolysis takes place. Similarly, I can give you another example. This is acetylene. Its oxidation. With oxygen, it forms carbon dioxide and water, but it also requires initiation, and here the initiation is heat. When we heat these two, on heating, carbon dioxide and water are formed. So it is a spontaneous process where initiation has been provided, and here the initiation is heat, here the initiation was electricity, here the initiation was ignition. So in all these cases we have provided the initiation. Similarly, the decomposition of calcium carbonate. This is calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate do not get decomposed on its own. For it to get decomposed, we provide it initiation in the form of heat. So when we provide initiation, our calcium carbonate gets decomposed into calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. So this is another example of spontaneous process where initiation has been provided in the form of heat. So these are some very typical examples where initiation has been provided. For example, here in this case, ignition has been provided as initiation. Here electricity has been provided as initiation, because until and unless we provide electricity, no electrolysis of water will take place. Similarly, oxidation of acetylene will not take place until and unless initiation in the form of heat is provided. And in the last example, our calcium carbonate has undergone decomposition but under the initiation of heat. No decomposition of calcium carbonate can take place until and unless heat is provided as initiation. So these are some examples of spontaneous processes where we have provided initiation. Now let me come to non-spontaneous processes. Non-spontaneous. They are quite opposite of spontaneous. These are the processes which do not take place on their own. They do not take place on their own, and also not even under strong initiation. So the processes which do not take place on their own, and even they cannot take place under strong initiation. If we provide strong initiation, they do not take place. Such processes are non-spontaneous processes. Now, as far as these processes are concerned, that is non-spontaneous processes, they do not take place under any circumstances. If we provide some initiation in the form of heat, in the form of electricity, in the form of sunlight, or in any other form of energy, they do not take place at all. For example, let me give a few examples of non-spontaneous processes. Suppose we take a container. Suppose this is a container. We have kept water in this container. This is water here. And let me try to dissolve gold in it. This is gold, Au. So when we try to dissolve gold in water, it does not dissolve. We observe that gold does not dissolve in water. Even if we heat it, suppose we provide initiation to it, heat, electricity, sunlight, these are all initiation. Suppose we provide these initiations to this process. What we find? That still no reaction takes place. Your gold does not dissolve in water. So here what we find, that reaction has not taken place on its own, and it has not taken place even under initiation. So such a process is known as non-spontaneous process, and it is a typical example of non-spontaneous process. Then we can take another example of it. Reaction between silver chloride and sodium nitrate. This reaction never takes place. They do not react together. If we heat them, if we provide electricity to them, no reaction will take place. So this is another example of non-spontaneous process. So as far as non-spontaneous processes are concerned, they are those processes which do not take place at all. Even they do not take place under strong initiation. So this is all about today's topic. Thank you very much.